Hi, I'm Tina, and I occasionally make videos about theater. Emphasis on occasionally. Today we're talking about the allegations that have come out against Charles Askenaizer, artistic director of Invictus Theater, and the aftermath that is currently unfolding. Standard disclaimers incoming: this is alleged, don't sue me, I'm just a little guy. And content warning for a lot of things. I'm not monetized, so I can say what I want, but please take care of yourselves and make a cup of tea while you're at it. Okay, let's get into it. Oh shit, low battery. Hold on. Alright, take two. To my understanding, this all began with a little new Instagram account called AI Free Chicago, which is an account dedicated to calling out theater companies for using AI in their marketing materials. When I say new, I mean brand spanking new. Their first post was only on January 5th of this year. The following day, this account made a post calling out Invictus Theater for using AI in their show posters. Examples include weird artifacting and an oddly placed finger on a hand. Now, because this is a new account, these posts didn't necessarily blow up until a while after. Coincidentally, at the same time that Invictus posted something featuring their supposed graphic designer for their upcoming seasons of shows on January 23rd. People, of course, flocked to the comments calling them out, and Invictus responded by blocking people and eventually turning off their comments. Not a great look. This is the part where I should add that Invictus Theater, before all this, was actually quite renowned. They won a bunch of Jeff Awards, which are basically the Tonys of Chicago theater. They were constantly featured by local newspapers. Artistic director Charles Askenaizer was actually recently featured in New City Stage as one of the 50 people who are at the forefront of Chicago theater. On January 27th, Ebby Offord came out with a video statement describing their experience with Invictus Theater. I'll be cutting down the videos for the sake of brevity, which was a very difficult task. But I'll link everything down in the description, and I encourage you to watch these videos and provide words of support if you are able. Ebby alleges a lot in her video, detailing multiple accounts of abuse and harmful practices at the hands of Charles during rehearsals for Hamlet, in which they played Ophelia, and Ruined, in which they were the director.
I have systematically documented the ways in which I was being groomed. First, by being offered opportunities for online Shakespeare classes, play readings, even being offered to understudy the artistic director of the company when he cast himself in Hamlet. I was offered to be his understudy and to stage manage the show. I was offered 5 projects in the span of 5 months, and an additional 6th and 7th project after those 2 projects that I turned down in 5 months. And then when I get into Hamlet, which is the show that all of this started, I am subjected to sexual harassment. I am objectified. I am emotionally abused. During my rehearsals for Ophelia's Mad Scene, Charles, because I'm going to use his name, I'm not going to call him the artistic director, Charles Askenaizer, would take me into the dressing room of Invictus Theater Company's space that used to exist on Thorndale before it caught on fire. And he would keep me in the dressing room alone with him. He would ask me to grab his hands and hold his hands like this in a fist and push and push and push and push and scream until my throat was raw. And the entire time that I was screaming in his face, he would repeat back to me, "You're never going to see your father again. He's never going to get to hear you sing. You're never going to get to hold each other. He's never going to hug you. You're never going to get to tell him how much you love him." Over and over and over again, until I would get to a point where I would literally physically start breaking down, and then he would push me on stage and expect me to perform the Mad Scene. And I would do it over and over and over again, sometimes 4 or 5 times in a row before I was allowed to have a break. A bunch of us go to the Ned. We say, "Hey, a lot of this stuff is happening in rehearsal. It feels gross. It feels abusive. Can you go talk to him?" I actually did not even approach my ex. I said, "Hey, I'm just kind of not doing great in rehearsal." He says, "Do you want me to talk to Charles about the way that your rehearsals are going?" I said, No, I don't. Because I was afraid of what would happen. He, because he is an adult with his own volition and had a responsibility to the cast members in that cast, said, no, multiple people have reached out and they want me to talk about what's going on because what's happening in our rehearsal room is not okay. So he goes and he sets up a meeting through the official channels, as he should, as the Ned. During this meeting, Charles demands to know the identity of all of the people who came forward anonymously. He demands to know their identities. And he says it is not his responsibility to be the therapist of his actors. We should be able to handle our own emotional issues. The Ned complaint happens. We have a large round table, all full cast meeting where Charles cries in front of us, and he tells us how heartbroken he is that people don't feel like they can come to him to talk about what they've experienced, how detrimental to the process he thinks these complaints are, and systematically forces every single person who came forward anonymously to talk to him face to face. We literally canceled rehearsal for the day so that we could cater to this man's feelings. And so he forces this big round table that we all end up doxing ourselves. And then he finds out, oh, this is who complained. Somehow it becomes a quiet as kept, but not really a secret, that Ebby is the reason for all of the complaints about Charles during the Hamlet process. And so my fight choreography becomes quite violent. I am literally being thrown around the stage. I'm being yelled at right here. Spit just flying in my face. The vitriol that I would see in this man's eyes as he would get in my face and he would scream at me. He would throw me to the ground. None of what was actually choreographed. Our assistant director asked him, "Do you want this scene to look as if you are assaulting her?" He said no. She said, "Well, you better fix it because it does." Was it fixed? No. And he tried to get the board to remove me from Hamlet and from directing Ruined. And when that didn't work, he pulled himself away from Ruined to take a break, to shift his artistic priorities. And I was left with the company's production manager, Todd Falstich. And both of them systematically worked together to make sure that the Ruined process was absolutely hellish for me. I was called incompetent, ineffectual. Every single problem that arose, apparently Charles and Todd had to save Ruined. They had to save it from me. And yet, as far as I'm aware, Ruined was the first Invictus production to ever be Jeff recommended. First. Ruined sold out every single weekend, including the Mondays. And yet I did nothing. I was ineffectual. Yeah. The thing that I've come to realize about my Invictus experience is that it was laden with microaggressive behavior, blatant racism, misogyny, sexism. The fact that I was punished for not wanting to pursue a romantic relationship with this man because all the signs were there. People go, "Oh, that sounds like that sucks, but you know, I've heard things are better now. I've heard it's not that bad. He's actually changed." Not that bad. Not that bad. All this company has done, any time that any person has come out against this man and the people who support him, all they have done is actively work to silence them. I know this is going to get reported as soon as I post it. I don't give a fuck. I've been sitting on this for years. Except I haven't been sitting on it. I'll talk to anybody who listens. But are you actually willing to listen? That's my question for y'all.
In the following days, more and more people were adding on their accounts. On the 28th, Shane Rhodes and Anna Troy shared their stories. Shane shared stories from Charles before his time in Invictus being emotionally abusive during a production of Two Gentlemen of Verona.
This was 10 years ago. This was the show he directed before he created Invictus Theater Company. I was co-producing a Shakespeare show with my then theater company. So we get into business with him to produce Two Gentlemen of Verona. And, one of the main reasons why we wanted to explore that play was because, funnily enough, I hate the ending of that play. I hate the ending. I found it to be fucking heinous. Me and a couple of friends, who were producing this, we were thinking about, this could actually be an interesting play to kind of explore, misogyny, male entitlement, bros before hoes culture, and, grape culture. I was playing Proteus, who is one of the male leads of this play, who kind of initiates a lot of this action. As we get into the process, he completely ignores it. And interestingly enough, as the play, as the rehearsal process develops, it feels like what he's trying to work towards is absolving my character. It was also one of the most discouraging rehearsal processes I've ever been through in my life. It was a process that completely drained whatever confidence I had walking in that I could do this. Also, there was just a lot that I wasn't agreeing with, and so I was kind of losing belief in the process because, the play tonally is a comedy, but he was directing it like it was some sort of broody thriller. And the way that I can best describe how Charles directs is somebody who learned all the wrong lessons from Meisner. He wants everybody yelling, screaming, and crying all the fucking time because that's where the emotional truth is. We would get done with an emotional rehearsal, and he would very performatively get emotional, and I would be on the floor exhausted, and he would get down on all fours, getting about this close to my face, just go, "You're not a bad person. You're not a bad person." One of the things that also happened during the process was one of our female leads was having a lot of problems with him because she hated the way that Charles was interpreting this from a cultural and feminist perspective. And she rightfully called it out. She was right. She was correct. And Charles, just being the stubborn, prideful guy that he is, never gave her an inch. Ever. Because it got in the way of what he wanted to do. It got in the way of how he viewed things. She would come to us and just be like, I feel like I'm saying too much, and but I feel like I want to speak. And I'm like, no, you speak your piece. You have to. And we'll back you up. That was something that I assured her, and other company members did as well. And then she tells us around tech that Charles has been calling her at 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. consistently to try to hash out their problems. I think something to stress is that we got a much more mild version of Charles because this was one of the few times he directed a show where he wasn't in complete power. He wasn't the AD. He had people who could actually check him, and if necessary, fire him. The real falling out really happened between us was, and it was a disagreement that I didn't even think was going to blow up. He was giving us notes, and after opening, he came multiple times to the show after opening and gave us copious notes. And I was pissed. A lot of the members of the cast were pissed because that's wildly inappropriate. He is the only director I've ever seen give notes after opening. I mean, we all know that, after opening, the show is your show. I took it upon myself to email him. And something to stress is during the whole pre-production process, I advocated for Charles all the fucking time. So this is one of the very few times where I was pushing back on him. And I just said, hey, Charles, I would like you to politely refrain from giving notes after the show. And he just went, no, Shane, you're wrong. This is a very regular part of the process, and if I'm going to give notes, I feel more than willing to do it. And I sent one more email saying, once again, I would like to politely ask you to refrain from giving notes. Just enjoy the show, watching it grow and blossom. This thing that you created, just enjoy the process of watching it grow as you come back over and over again. A few days later, I get a call from him. I decided to ignore it because I knew what it was going to be about, and I didn't want to get into a fight, and I was like, fuck this. No, absolutely not. And this is the voicemail he leaves. Shane, you are wrong. You are fucking wrong! It is so normal to give notes after opening. And you know what? If you don't want notes, I'll ask the rest of the cast who wants notes, and I'll give them notes! I've been hearing a lot of stories about how some people want to defend Charles. No, you don't defend this man. No. My story, I promise you, is the tip of the fucking iceberg. Because how he directs when he's the one fully in power is a different Charles. Much different. And if any of you want to come here and tell me that, oh, he's gotten better, he's chilled out a bit more, let me give you a little bit more insight into why. Because multiple people, including myself, have talked to local newspapers here about him. We thought they were going to publish about him. We haven't heard shit. But we know for a fact that they requested comment from him. If his behavior has gotten better, it is not because of altruistic reasons. It is because he knows he is being watched. He will do what he can get away with. Abuse is not art.
And Anna corroborated his story as the non-equity deputy. I should also explain, in equity theater there is a deputy who is a member of the cast that is voted upon by other members to serve as the representative of the entire cast, and they handle any interpersonal issues that may come up. A lot of non-equity theaters also adopted this practice.
I was involved in a production that Charles Askenaizer directed about 10 years ago, Two Gentlemen of Verona, which was the production that I think sparked him to start Invictus Theater Company. I second everything that Shane Rhodes has said in his video. I was the Ned on this production. I had a very small role, so I was not directly impacted by Charles and what he was doing in the room, but I heard it all. Went to the company several times with complaints about Charles and his behavior. The way that he would, I guess, side coach, which is that a scene is actively going on and Charles is standing on the sidelines literally screaming at people and screaming, go, 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 push, go harder, go farther. On top of that, I think something that got missed from Shane's video that I do think is very important is when we signed up to do this production of Gentlemen of Verona, it was pitched as kind of, we're going to talk about women's issues, etc. And I will never forget during the first read, after we had read the play, and specifically the rape scene at the end, Charles said, and I quote, "Proteus isn't a bad guy. He's just a guy who's having a bad day." And if that's not red flags enough for you, on top of that, he suddenly wanted Proteus to have a gun, which was not mentioned in auditions. We did not have the right fight people for it, etc. And we all pushed back incredibly hard against this. And it became such a point of contention that he couldn't have this gun because the entire cast said, no, we're not comfortable with that. And just the berating that happened from us saying, no, that's not a story we're comfortable telling. And that's not the story you sold us at auditions. This is a different story. I just want to say, as somebody who has been very vocal about telling people not to work at Invictus, that I hear all your stories. I support you. I stand with you. And I hope that Charles Askenaizer never directs another production again.
On the 29th, even more people came out with their stories. Julia K. Rolfe described her account as a company member of Invictus.
I signed on as a company member. I was a company member from 2018 to 2019 doing marketing and communications. And it was supposed to be about like 5-10 hours a week. And they knew I was an actor as well, and so I got to act in a limited capacity with them as well. My time just started going up. It went from like 5 to 10 hours to needing to be like 15, 20, 25, etc. And it was just not sustainable. So I ran up to Charles, like, I need help. I need, I can't do as much, blah, blah, blah. And as soon as I started pushing back, things shifted. So as I started pushing back on the admin and marketing side, we are also in rehearsals for a fundraiser show. So there was an event fundraiser, and as part of that event, we were doing small scenes throughout the fundraiser. So the incident was we are rehearsing, and I'm in a rehearsal room with like maybe 5 people or so, including Charles and another actor who's in the scene with the 2 of us. And the scene is Charles character is confronting 2 bullies. That is myself and one other actor. And we're starting the rehearsal process, and he goes, we're going to use modern language to just really connect to the script. And that's typical if you're working with elevated language or Shakespeare. Not an issue, not surprising. But that's not what happened. Instead, not just using modern language, Charles used it to get right in my face. Another account you will see throughout experiences, and just yell at me, and not only use modern language, use my personal name. So in this scene where Charles' character is supposed to be confronting his 2 bullies, and every other time we ran it, he stops maybe 4 to 6 feet from us and is talking to both of us. Now, when we're doing modern language to connect to the script, he gets so close. He's inches from my face. And he's saying, Julia, you're a fucking bitch. You're a fucking bitch, Julia. And I'm not gonna lie, I froze. And I'm just standing there dumbstruck, and I'm looking around, I'm looking at my other actor who's next to me, who's also the bully, who he's not looking at all. I'm looking to stage manager and a couple other people at the table on the side who aren't actors, and I'm just, no one gives any kind of reaction whatsoever. He goes on at least 60 to 90 seconds, just repeating that. Just so fury, spit, all of it. I go to 2 company members I trust who were not in the room. And I go, hey, weird question. Does Charles do this thing where, like, during rehearsal process, he'll, like, say we use modern language, and they're like, oh, yeah. And I was like, yeah, but, like, does it ever get, like, elevated? And they're like, oh yeah, like usually at least one person he'll go up to and like really give it to him. He just does that. That's his process. So I left the company after that. And I was new to the city, and I was young. That is also a repeat account that you will see throughout others' videos. And so I was worried about speaking out, and I was just like, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me. So people would ask, like, oh, you used to work with Invictus, like, why'd you leave? And for like years, I just kept it generic. Oh, I was just pursuing other things. Oh, I wanted to try something out, blah, blah, blah. And then the question changed. It was no longer like, oh, you used to be with Invictus, why'd you leave? It turned a few years ago into, you were with Invictus, right? Be like, yeah, I was, like 2018, 2019. And like, was it always abusive? The amount of people that came forward on the Chicago Theater Makers Facebook page, it was, I think, 2023, maybe 2022, speaking out about Charles and bringing some of this stuff to light, not all of it, some of this stuff to light within the Chicago theater community, the amount of people that rallied, more people, I got so many messages, so many people came to me for years after seeing it. I promise you are far from alone, for better or worse. For anyone who is debating coming forward, or for anyone struggling with the thought of, oh, do I burn this bridge? Whether you posted the video or you haven't posted anything yet. We focus so much on a bridge and not wanting to burn bridges because we don't want to lose future opportunities. There's a lot I could say on that, but the biggest thing I think we need to all focus on is a bridge goes both ways. A bridge is so you can get from here to here, and you can get from here to here. We focus so much on, oh, if I burn this bridge, I can't get back over here. But we forget that if we do not burn the bridge, this can come over here. Burn it. Burn it. You don't want what's on the other side, even if it comes with a Jeff.
Jack Morsavillo recounts his time as a non-equity deputy on Hamlet, corroborating a lot of what Ebby said.
So then when I was cast in the production of Hamlet in 2021, and I saw that the role of Hamlet had already been cast, my hackles were raised a little bit, and it was confirmed for me. We didn't get notified until close to that first rehearsal that Charles was, in fact, directing the show, and he was also going to be starring as Hamlet. This seemed like a very bad idea to all of us, and some people even said it on the first day of rehearsal. Wow, it's really bold of you to do this. Like, is this going to work? Are you okay to do this? And of course, Charles was like, yeah, totally. Our assistant director was going to be there and was going to shelter him through the process and all of us through the process, so everyone would feel supported and so on and so forth. On that first day, we signed our conflict resolution path and we signed our handbook and, the normal first rehearsal things. In the first week, we nominated cast non-equity deputy. I was selected, and I went up for it. I was happy to do it for the cast. And we were off to the races, starting with table work. And initially with table work, Charles was extremely passionate about the play, seemed very excited about all of our ideas. A lot of the ensemble had really interesting ideas and takes on their characters, and he was very excited to hear all of that. But then, as table work went on and then staging began, and Charles got on his feet and actually started to be the actor Charles and not just the director Charles, it became very clear he had no intention of hearing any of us out or really employing any of the ideas that we had. And I started to notice in the room, maybe a week or so into rehearsal, that several of the actors, notably a lot of the actors of color, and most of the femme presenting actors in the show, were being pushed further in their scene work, not only than anyone else, but also pushed further in their scene work to a point that wasn't necessary. He would have actors like screaming their heads off for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. They would do these very emotionally fraught scenes 5, 6, 7 times for the entire rehearsal. And there was one experience we had, we were doing the graveyard scene, and he took one of the actors off stage. Basically, it was during the scene work, all of a sudden he just takes the guy and brings him out into the lobby. So we didn't know what was going on. So we all started chatting. We were chatting to each other. And then he basically screamed from the lobby, like, everyone stay in it. Stay in it. Like, don't goof around. Stay in it. Stay in the scene. And we're a little bit like, okay, that's whatever. So we're talking quietly amongst ourselves, but we're staying in it. Whatever. It's kind of, we felt that it was like a little too much of a reaction, but whatever. Then all of a sudden we started hearing blood-curdling screams come from the lobby. The actor was being asked to press his hands against Charles's hands and scream and wail. And this went on for 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And Charles kept screaming things back at him. You're never going to see her again. You're never going to see her again. You're never going to hear her sing. She's fucking dead. She's fucking dead. You're never going to see her again. Now, we were not told that he was going to do this exercise with somebody. There was no preamble. There was nothing. And then we're all just standing there quiet in the theater, confused. One of the actors actually excused himself. He's like, I can't listen to this. This is horrible. And then Charles, we see him like take the actor and like push him onto the stage and have him just do the scene. Several actors came to me as the Ned with these issues saying, you know, I don't feel supported. I actually feel like he's being very abusive and aggressive with me. His language is very dismissive or just violent and volatile. These are the words that people were saying to me in their emails and messages. So after hearing some of these, I set up a meeting with Charles to basically go through some of what people were saying and just try to address these issues as a director. Kept everyone anonymous. Charles insisted in our meeting after I was bringing this up. He insisted in our meeting. He said, "Well, who are these people that are coming forward?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to say because they asked to be anonymous." And he was like, "Well, I need to know who they are." And I was like, "Well, you don't because, first of all, you don't because they're staying anonymous per your handbook that I signed. As the Ned, people can keep their identities secret if they want to. That's their prerogative. Secondly, there's enough actors across the play, across the ensemble, that this is more of a behavioral issue in general that needs to be changed, not just like with a specific scene or a specific character. Like it's you that is the problem." So naturally, the meeting didn't go very well. I essentially told him, you know, people are having a problem with the conflict of interest that is being apparent that you chose, having a starring role in the cast, being the director and owning the company. People don't feel safe to come to you with these things. That's why everyone wants to stay anonymous. That's why I'm coming to you to tell you about this. Then the meeting ended in a huff. I was dismissed from that meeting, and I felt, well, that didn't go well at all. The next day, I received a phone call from Todd Falstich, the production manager, who was currently still working with Invictus. Todd wants to just chat about our meeting from the previous night. I felt this was unnecessary because I didn't have any more to say. I told Charles, I did my duties as the Ned, and that was it. And Todd even said, you know, well, yeah, Charles says he really feels bad about everything. And I just said to both of them, I'm like, well, this is, you know, Charles, this is really great that you feel this way. But based on the meeting we had yesterday, you seemed incredibly opposed to changing anything. When I brought up some solutions of things he can do for these exercises to make people get into them and out of them in a safe way, he shot all those down. He said that would take too much time. Todd, we kept going back and forth about some solutions, some things that we can fix. They were bringing up, you know, should we have a meeting with the cast to talk through this? I said, I don't think it's a good idea. I think we should just have Charles change the behavior, maybe apologize to the ensemble, but change the behavior, and then people will see that the change was made. That's it. That's all that needs to happen. And then Todd said during the meeting, well, you know, I want to make it very clear that Charles will not be removed as the director of this show. There's no way. And I said, well, no one brought that up as an option. Like, I wasn't saying he needed to be fired or quit the show, just that he has to change his behavior. I was trying to be proactive. And I said, well, you know, Todd, I find it strange in this handbook that I keep bringing up as the Ned, I was looking at the conflict resolution path. And I asked him, I said, okay, well, just walk me through this. If an actor has a problem with Charles the actor, they ostensibly would go to the director. Well, but Charles is also the director. Dang. Well, who do we go to next? Oh, Todd. He's the production manager. But then Todd made it clear in the phone call. He actually said to me that they will follow Charles's vision for the company and for the show. So essentially what he told me was, if you have a problem with Charles the actor, you can't talk to Charles the director. And if you talk to Todd the production manager, he's going to be answering to Charles the artistic director. So I brought this up to both of them and said, you understand the position that you're putting all of your ensemble into, that they don't actually have a safe path to talk to anybody. And also Charles had influence over the whole board of Invictus Theater Company. So even if we went to the board with something, it wouldn't have mattered. Me saying that, when I said that to both of them, it wasn't refuted. And then it became very abundantly clear after that was the rule of law at Invictus Theater Company for years, and it still is. Charles is the boss. His way or the highway.
Kate McDuffie recounts her experience being a teacher with the company because, oh yeah, Invictus also did acting classes.
I started at Invictus in 2019, and that was with a production of The Merchant of Venice, and he asked me to become a company manager after that. And in the spring of 2021, he invited me to teach a Monologue 1 class. Now, Charles and I, and many of us here in Chicago, learned a lot, if not everything we know about Shakespeare and Chekhov from Susan Hart and the late Jeffrey Carlson. But when Susan and Jeffrey went their separate ways with teaching, Charles decided to start teaching Shakespeare classes as a part of his company, with a curriculum that was eerily similar to Susan's. And not only that, right next door to her, simultaneously at the same time, at North Shore Baptist Church. So not only was it a similar curriculum, he decided to set up shop right next door and made a very sad and pathetic attempt to steal her gig, which he never had any hope of doing in the first place. But so when I agreed to teach that class, I insisted on creating my own curriculum and study guide, because I did not want to use anything so heavily inspired by somebody else's work. And I was a high school teacher for 6 years. I had directorial experience in teaching Shakespeare at the high school level. And I had expertise in creating materials specifically designed for people with learning differences. And so incorporating different learning styles into my teaching was something that was really important to me and that I was passionate about. So he agreed to let me create my own materials. I spent weeks doing it. And I kept him updated. Everything was great until I got a call the day before I was supposed to teach this class from Charles saying that, unfortunately, I don't even know if he used the word unfortunately, I have the emails in case anyone's interested, I would not be able to use those materials unless I copyrighted it under his company's name. I said that I was not comfortable with that. It was my intellectual property. I had created it myself and spent weeks doing it in my own design and style, and it was a labor of love. And I said I'd be happy to copyright it under my own name, and you can just use it if you want. And he said, no, it belongs to Invictus, or you can't use it. There was no apology, no, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't think of this until the very last second, just a flat, nope, you're not using it. So obviously I felt really upset and betrayed by this. I went to the board, I went to Todd Falstich, of course, who tried to just talk me down. But ultimately I just decided to leave the company because I felt like it was a betrayal after all of the work that I put in those 2 years, and that was it. There was no recognition that anything shitty had been done. So,
Amy Malcolm also shared her experience with Charles and her attempts to diversify the company.
Charles and I met when he was assistant director to Lavina Jadwani's production of Julius Caesar, which I was a part of. R.I.P. Lavina, I love you. Things went fine. He later cast me in a staged reading because he enjoyed my work, he said, in Julius Caesar. It was a staged reading with blocking, he, as he liked to do at times. And he wanted the lead actor and I to share a kiss at the final scene, climactic scene after a fight, but didn't provide rehearsal time to practice the kiss. Now, this was more than 10 years ago, and I don't want to say it was of the time. It felt icky at the time that we weren't provided proper rehearsal for this intimate moment, and the actor and I decided not to proceed with the kiss. A few years later, when Charles started Invictus Company, he asked me to be a company member. He was asking friends and theater makers who he thought were talented and enjoyed working with to be company members. So I was flattered and said, sure. Once the mission statement had been drafted, I noticed the word diversity in the first sentence, and I expressed concern around that word when the company didn't represent diversity. I mentioned maybe we wait to add that word until the company can represent it, because the people he had asked were all white. And he responded with, well, we're diverse in age. That's not the point I was trying to get at. He also said something along the lines of, well, I don't know anybody of color who fits the bill for the gaps I'm trying to fill. And I said, well, I do. And I gave him a name, someone to talk to, and he spoke with them. And they later told me that the meeting was unproductive, and they felt a bit dismissed. Fast forward a few more years, my husband directed Love's Labor's Lost there. I sometimes helped cast his shows. There was a lovely casting director. Invictus's casting director was lovely. And I wanted to provide more names to diversify the audition roster, so Dylan could cast a more diverse cast. So I reached out to friends and colleagues who I've worked with and I knew he would enjoy working with, people he's mentioned he wanted to work with again or for the first time, in order to diversify that audition roster. And Dylan was able to cast a lovely, diverse cast. After one of the audition evenings, I was walking to the car with Dylan, my husband, and Charles, and I mentioned to Charles, I think that the Love's Labor's cast should at least be 50% diverse. This was 10 plus years ago. And Charles' response was, why? Why not cast the best person in the role? Now, I did try to explain why diversity was important, but I left Charles that evening feeling like it went on deaf ears, much like when I spoke to him about the mission statement a few years prior.
And my colleague, Elise Soder, also recounts her time in the cast of Two Gentlemen of Verona.
I worked with him before Invictus was formed, and that was on a production of The Two Gentlemen of Verona in 2016, which I know a couple of other people have discussed in their videos. I played Julia in that production, and I was also a company member with the producing company. For the cast of The Two Gentlemen of Verona, we rejected his idea of bringing a firearm into the final scene of the play. It was like a reverse Chekhov's gun. There had not been a firearm present in the rest of the show. And we rejected his idea, and he basically had a little baby tantrum and told us essentially that if we didn't want him to direct it, then we could do it ourselves. And he stomped off in a huff to a corner of the rehearsal room and sat there with his arms crossed for the rest of the rehearsal period. It is important to note that this production did not have a stage manager until tech. And full disclosure, that is not the fault of Charles. That was the fault of the producing company, which I was a part of. So we will start with the very first rehearsal, that was staging, blocking, scene work. First rehearsal after, the first read. And he had scheduled it to be this scene between Julia, the character that I was playing, and Proteus, the character that Shane was playing. And it is a very intimate goodbye scene. scene before Proteus goes off to live in a different city. And we read through it, and then Charles asked us if we thought that these characters had had sex. And I thought about it for a second, and then I was like, you know what? No. Because I thought it was a more interesting and kind of funnier choice to have Julia just be very thirsty and like chasing Proteus down. And Charles essentially said, well, I think they have. And then he had us try the scene several different times, depending on how long it had been since these characters had had sex. Anywhere from they had never had sex to immediately post-coitus. Let me remind you, there was no stage manager in the room. So it was me and Shane bumbling through, scripts in hand, just coming up with intimacy, I guess. And I trusted Shane, so it's, you know, we're good, but it's two actors pretending to have just finished having sex in a room alone with Charles watching. We were staging the very final moments of the play. Tension in the cast was very high. Tension between the cast and Charles, I should say. We were worn out, and we had been expected to emotionally live the character's trauma. That's how he rolls. It is not safe. It is not sustainable. And but as somebody 10 years younger than I am now, I really wanted it to be good. We get to this final moment, and Charles very much wants the last image of the play, the last image that the audience is left with, to be Proteus and Julia alone on stage together. And I don't know if this had something to do with what Shane talked about, with Charles seeming to want to absolve Proteus. Like maybe there would be some forgiveness between them. I don't know. But if you have not seen or aren't familiar with the ending of The Two Gentlemen of Verona, it is rough. Proteus attempts SA on Sylvia, the other female lead, while Julia, dressed as a boy, witnesses it. And in our production, I advocated that for Julia to attempt to intervene, which we did incorporate into the fight choreography. So I told Charles that I did not think that a woman who had witnessed what Julia witnessed and attempted to intervene in my Julia's case would allow herself to be left alone in a room with the person who had perpetrated that violence. And I was met with, well, you at least have to try. You at least have to try it my way. And so even though I knew, I could feel how emotionally unsafe it was, I was like, we'll try it. We did a full run that day. My nerves screaming at me the entire time. We got to the end of the show. I'm standing there on stage in the rehearsal room with Proteus, really my friend Shane, and Charles calls blackout, and I crumpled to the floor, sobbing. I know that I pushed Shane away from me. I think I pushed somebody else away from me as well. I did not want to be touched. especially not by a man. But what Charles does is he comes swooping in like, I don't know, the knight in shining armor that he thinks he is, wraps his arms around me unasked, and then with performative tears in his voice tells me what a good job I did. And that was kept in the play. I did that ending every time we performed it, and I hated it every time. So you can resist him and be met with, you know, emotional abuse, or you can do what he wants and just be met with emotional abuse. Like, what? There's no winning. No wonder Invictus Theater Company uses AI for their marketing materials, because AI is not interested in artistry. AI is not interested in collaboration. It's not going to give you any resistance or any pushback. AI is going to do exactly what he wants.
So, in case you weren't keeping track, that is 8 total accounts of a consistent pattern of abuse and poor practices at the hands of Charles and Invictus Theater over the past decade. On the same day, cast members of Invictus's current production, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, posted an open letter that reads as the following. To the Board of Directors of Invictus Theater Company, we, the following cast members of Invictus Theater Company's production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, formally resign from this production in solidarity with the revelations of abuse that have come to light in the last week. After giving the Board of Directors a grace period to craft and release a formal response, which was mandated by the cast unanimously to occur by Thursday, January 29th, no later than 8 a.m., this has not occurred. Furthermore, all communications with the board to ask why that demand had not been met have gone unanswered. It is the belief of the following cast members that no powerful resolution or repair can occur without a complete shutdown of this production and the removal of Charles Askenaizer as both director and artistic director of Invictus Theater Company. This action already feels far too late, and we must take this action now. We made it very clear that the more time that passes, the deeper this wound becomes for our community. By saying nothing, you are saying everything, and that is not a narrative we will perpetuate for our community that is in so much pain. Signed, Andrea Uppling, James Lewis, Christopher Ratliff, and Renee Stone. Now, I've seen other people claim that other cast members also walked away, but I, of course, cannot confirm that information. On February 2nd, Invictus made a post, which is so far their only statement, that Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was postponed. Nothing addressing the allegations, just that the show would be postponed. Also on February 2nd, the Chicago Tribune shared an article, which is behind a paywall by the way, thanks for that, with a statement from the company that reads, the Board of Directors of Invictus Theater is aware of online allegations regarding Charles Askenaizer in his role as artistic director. We are taking these concerns about the fair and respectful treatment of our theater cast and staff seriously. The board is engaging a third-party investigator to conduct an independent analysis and, based on the findings, advise on appropriate next steps. The statement apparently also says that Charles is stepping away to allow this investigation to proceed without distraction. So we'll see if anything comes from that. So the other day, on February 4th, the Jeff Awards announced their nominees for the non-equity Jeffs, and guess who's nominated for Best Director and front and center on the graphic? Yup, Charles Askenaizer! Not only that, Invictus Theater is nominated for 13 other awards! The outrage I feel is incredibly palpable. On one hand, I could possibly understand that these nominations were decided before everything came out and it's relatively short notice, but on the other hand, it is absolutely heinous to celebrate a theater company that is now known for actively causing harm to their artists. So I guess that's why I've been bolstered to make this video. This can't go away. We don't get to feel our outrage and make a big hubbub and then let Charles quietly come back in some other form like other directors have tried to do and honestly already did. I'm tired of seeing my fellow artists be harmed like this. Because let's be honest, if you've ever worked in Chicago theater, you have some story of being abused or not protected by a company. I have a story of being not protected by a company. And it shouldn't be that way. My good friend and colleague Gabby Labatka made an excellent video responding to the situation regarding how harm happens in the theater community and what we can do about it. I'll be linking it down below.
In the wake of this Invictus reckoning, I keep on getting messages in my inbox about, with like two major questions, which is, why does this keep happening? And how can we stop it? I think some of the major reasons why this continues to happen, besides like institutional issues, which that is certainly a part of the discussion, but right now I'm talking about the community at large, right, and us as individuals within that community. And I think one of the reasons why this keeps on happening is because of scarcity mindset, and because of the bystander effect. So most of us know what the scarcity mindset is. If you don't know what that is, you know, theater is an industry where, as artists, we are in a constant state of feast or famine when it comes to work. And that famine, that hunger drives us to continue to seek work out. And it also perpetuates a fear that we will never have work again. Okay. And that fear can be so loud that it prevents us from intervening with harm, right? Because some people might think, like, if I speak up about this thing, then I'll be difficult to work with, or what if I'm wrong and then somebody sues me, all this sort of stuff, right? Like, it really does get in our way of standing up. And one of the ways to combat scarcity mindset, besides like, please go to therapy if that resource is available to you, is just like the reflection that there is more work. There will be more work, right? I want to be sensitive to the fact that right now in Chicago, there actually is a scarcity of work. There's a lot less work than there usually is. There wasn't enough work for everybody to begin with anyway. So like there is always this hunger in us, this hustle in us to find the next gig. It is a part of our ecosystem, and it is a reflex that we can also learn to move through and not react from. It does take skill and it does take practice to notice that feeling of scarcity coming up for yourself and how it might interfere with your reaction to difficult information, or interfere with your reaction to a hostile work environment that you might be in. The bystander effect is also perpetuated by this. The bystander effect is a psychological phenomenon where when you're in a group of people and you are noticing something harmful happen in front of you, you assume that everyone else sees it too and that somebody else will stand up to it. And this is common out in public. It happens at work. It happens in the theater, right? It's this reflex that a lot of people aren't aware of, and it is something that like we need to combat in ourselves, and that takes effort to notice that you are falling for the bystander effect. These things have an effect on our fear response, right? The fight, the flight, the fawn, the freeze. Yeah. When you feel scarce, insecure, right? Then we make a lot of decisions from fear. And our natural fear responses, they're very important to notice. And we can develop skills to help us react to situations differently. And it takes training and it takes work. If you haven't done it in a long time, or if you haven't ever really done it at all, you need to interrogate what your values are, right? You need to interrogate and name what your values are as an artist, yeah? And I don't mean like style preferences. I don't mean like what kind of theater do you value, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like, how do you operate in this space? What is important to you, right? If I value diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, those are values to me, right? Then I need to start building up boundaries in order to protect those values. Yeah, so you have to name the values, and then you have to build up boundaries to protect those values. And boundaries can mean, the term boundary has multiple definitions. In this case, the boundary around your values is your integrity, right? It is what you are willing or not to accept to defend your values. In order to maintain the strength, the fortitude of your integrity, we also need to have an action plan, right? Like for maintenance purposes, and also like when we are confronted with harm that is happening right in front of us, or challenge to our values that is happening right in front of us. So we have to develop an action plan, right? And action plans require rehearsal, and we are theater artists, so we're good at rehearsal. Say, for instance, you value anti-racism, and you want to make sure that you operate in an anti-racist way, right? And that's a value. So let's say that something threatens the boundary, something threatens the integrity. Like, for instance, a director yelling in the face of a Black person, right? That's like a very blatant example, okay? So what are your action plans if you witness something like that? Do you have a plan in place? If you don't, there are some things you can do, right? Like, okay, so if I ever witness someone being extremely violent to somebody, I am going to put myself between the person who is being racist and the person who is receiving the racism, and I'm going to disrupt it, right? That is an action item that you can do. And it is something that you can practice at home, right? You kind of have to imagine the circumstances that you might find yourself in so that you can defend that person and defend that value, right? It's similar to doing a fire drill. Like, I know people like dismiss fire drills all the time, but when you're in a fear response, or when you're operating from a place of scarcity, or a scarcity mindset is starting to threaten that boundary, that value, that integrity, you need to have practice, right? So you can kind of reroute or move through or with your fear response. Now, as a Chicago theater community, we tried to build skills like that through the Chicago Theater Standards, right? The Chicago Theater Standards are a tool, though, for institutions that are non-union, right? And we can use them as inspiration for ourselves as individuals, but we also have a lot of individual work to do, because that tool, it has not been updated in 10 years. And like all tools, they can be abused, as we heard in a few of the stories where the Chicago Theater Standards were utilized for retaliation in an inappropriate way, right? And so we as individuals need to seek out education and training so that we can take care of each other better before harm happens and in the moment that harm is happening. Ultimately, this reckoning is about accountability. Our reaction often is to look to the institutions and tell them that they need to be accountable. And they do need to be accountable to us, right? Like they don't exist without our labor, without our art, without our craft, right? So they should be accountable to us. And I'm not saying that that they bear no responsibility here. They definitely bear a lot of responsibility here. And we as individual members of the community also need to hold ourselves accountable so we can prepare ourselves and practice how we're going to take care of each other in the moment, instead of, again, when we meet critical mass of harm. If we hear that a harmful artistic director has changed or grown, how? And or if you feel yourself wanting to say, well, something must have changed, that you can't make that assumption. You have to find out what work has been done, right? What are the new value systems? What are the new action plans? And do they maintain integrity? Yeah, somebody else's well-being, sorry for the emotion, but somebody else's well-being is not a price that I'm willing to pay in order to make theater. And I believe that that is true for the majority of the Chicago theater community. And I think that we just need to practice and step up to the plate so that we don't become complicit in the harm or the cost of that person's well-being.
So here's my call to action instead of the like, comment, subscribe stuff. Do not let this go away. Pressure the Jeffs to drop Invictus Theater Company from their nominations, and if they don't, do not celebrate if Invictus wins an award. Invictus turned off their comments on Instagram, but from what I can tell, their Facebook page is still free reign. Pressure them to say something, anything regarding the allegations, and when that answer is not sufficient enough, call them out on it. Keep calling them out. Do not let Charles or this company produce another show, and do not give them an opportunity to harm anyone ever again. That's all I've got. Bye.